and I'll round up the reviews here. My series is something that I was looking forward to, just at the start of the previous season when I set my eyes on it. It is the Shoushimin series. So this is based off a series of novels written by Yonezo Honobu. And if you guys don't know who that is, or this might sound familiar actually to some people because he is the very same author behind Hyoka, which was the first of the classic literature club novel series, mystery novel series, the Kutenbu series. And so that started off with Hyoka in 2001, I believe. He started writing the novels, and these are actual novels, right? So, what I mean by that is there's like a general genre of literature that we know today as light novels, right? And they're the kind of thinner pulp fiction style books that are kind of written to almost complement to be like a secondary genre to or secondary form of media next to manga, right? Or anime, so on, or visual novels, so on and so forth, right? So we have these light novels, web novels, and kind of phone novels and pulp fiction kind of stuff. That's much thinner, much a little bit more shallow, I would say, and that is not what um, Yonezawa Honobu is all about. He is writing big, chunking, proper novels, like novels that you read in terms of like science fiction or mystery or whatever, like full. He is an actual proper novelist. He has won like legit mystery novel awards and stuff like that. He is like a full novel writer. So he started writing this 2001. I mean, he wrote stuff beforehand, but he published his first sort of major breakout series in the Kotenbu series in 2001. That is continuing up until this day, and he started the Shoushimin series 3 years after that in 2004, and he's been kind of going back and forth writing volumes for both these series, and he's I guess doing it concurrently, and he's been publishing novel volumes. So again, these are like full proper novels. They're like it's I guess another similar reminiscent one that often gets like a light novel-ish treatment is Horizon in the Middle of Nowhere, right? Horizon in the Middle of Nowhere is not just some light novel and they're just going around whacking people and it's just, talking about the timelines and all that crap, right? They are, if you look at the physical copy, they are big. They are thick boys. So so these are actual proper mystery, right? Full-time mystery novels in the case of Hyoka and Shoshimin and the Kotenbu series. So that's what the adaptation is from. The adaptation itself for the anime is has been headed by Lapin Track, who usually does a lot of in between and second key animation stuff, but they have done at least a couple of other. They have headed the production of a couple of other anime. They started with Android, which I thought was personally pretty iffy. They've had ups and downs. So Android was pretty iffy. Sarazanmai was, I believe, an anime original that was Noitamina block. I forget if I covered it or if it was Dark or somebody else, but it was a pretty good Noitamina block series, if I remember correctly. They did some shorts and then they did in recent memory Undead Girl Murder Farce, which Nier gave a pretty positive review for about. And then this is their latest anime adaptation. So in terms of the general staff for this, Track, so animation producer, in-house animation producer Watabe Masakazu, who has been a producer and an anime producer organizer for Track pretty much since the beginning from their Android days. He worked together with sort of the Promise Neverland duo from Cloverworks, which is I believe Mamoru Kanbei as the director, as well as Toshi Ono Toshiya as the series composition slash scriptwriter. This is sort of like the sort of Promise Neverland duo, although they have worked with Subete F ni Naru or the Perfect Insider before. But yeah, he brought together the Promise Neverland crew as well as some other people from that sort of team, the Promise Neverland team. He combines that with they combined that with a couple of more veterans as well as some up and comers such as Obata Takahiro from Inside Lap Band Track, as well as some other people from other like subcontractors, some production IG like Niigata studio teams, stuff like that. But it is like kind of not like crew composed mostly, again, I would say, of the Promised Neverland team and some other sort of former Lap and Track connections. So that's sort of how it works out. It kind of panned out, but it is a pretty solid team overall, I would say. Mostly, again, veterans. They know each other pretty well. They work with each other pretty well. And Promised Neverland was overall pretty satisfying in terms of the audiovisual and kind of how it formed out. So um, I would say pretty dependable team overall. In terms of the voice acting cast, a decent amount of kind of up and comers here. We have Yomi Hina as the main one of the main characters, the small girl, Osana Yuki. Yomi Hina has done roles in, I think probably her most famous role is would be Shinju Inui in Bistal. Oh, I think the smaller kind of like lolly kind of ish character. And in
Sorry,
more
you
recent
can't say
times, he
that
did.
word anymore. What's the new term? Uh,
I don't even know what
uh,
What?
the other term is.
wasn't there a new term?
Is
I don't
there?
know.
There's a new tag that you have to use from now on. When you go
It's
on like
probably summer. Yeah,
yeah, whatever.
but yeah. Anyways, uh, the other main recent role that she did was Yamada Anna in The Dangers of My Heart. I keep mixing up Yomi Hina actually with Sugete Hina. Sugete Hina is the one that did what is it? The Bang Dream and the Marine in Bistal, as well as one of the Gala characters in Bang Dream. But I keep mixing the two together up. But Yomi Hina is hasn't got as much kind of breakout roles, but she is. She, I guess this is her potential breakout role here, but she is definitely an up and comer. The main male character, um, Kobato Jogoro, is played by Umeda Shuichiro. He's been popping off recently. I believe he'll be pretty much, scooping up shit tons of roles probably by late 2024 or early going into 2025. I think 2025 will probably be his year. I mean, this year is already popping up for him a lot too. So he did the main character in Senpai wa Pineapple, Senpai wa Otokonoko, which I also reviewed this season. And he's had a couple of other main roles as well. He did Akira in Zom 100. He did, I believe, one of the main characters in Mahotsukai Remaking, a couple of other roles. He usually does like younger boy roles, kind of more sprightly, kind of thinner, kind of wispier, higher voice register. But he is he's quite good overall. He's poised to be one of the next kind of prolific voice actors, for especially voicing like main characters and stuff like that. So he's definitely exploding onto the scene right now. And I would say probably the third kind of like psychic character, Furukawa Makoto, who is known for doing Saitama and One Punch Man. He's doing the sidekick here, Dojima Kengo, and they're kind of backed up by a mix of kind of people who haven't made their breakouts yet, alongside some pretty well-known people here. Seto Asami, Anzai Chika, Kawasamaki, stuff like that. A couple of people that you guys have seen the names before here. So pretty solid cast, I would say. I think in this case, Yomiya Hina and yeah, Yomiya Hina didn't really have the hardest of jobs because her job in this series was literally just to keep her voice as uniform as possible and not really like do any sort of variance in her tones or whatever. It's just her being a kudere. Not even kudere, but like essentially just like the same kind of tone of voice for the entire series. So probably not the hardest job or probably not the one that you trot out on your resume to kind of show off, but it is still breakout role, I would say, because it is a main role. So hopefully she gets some more, I would say, diverse roles in the future, and we'll see how that goes. But yeah, quick coverage on the OPED and audiovisuals. For opening is the opening for Shoshimin was "Sweet Memory" by Eve. So Eve is a pretty well-known Vocaloid producer in Japan. I would say the song itself ended up being a pretty standard male kind of vocal J-pop, kind of city pop vibes. Um, the visuals were above average. Again, this was pretty solid all around by Track. I wouldn't say the storyboard itself was anything to write home about, but again, the visual quality was quite good. Ending theme is was E Ito E Tokenai by Ammo, which is a Japanese rock band based in Osaka. They they had a pretty good kind of solid Japanese soft rock kind of vibes done by this band. I would say musically it's definitely a cut above what anime series often kind of hire bands for EDs. So I would say probably check it out. It's a pretty good song. Um, the visuals itself was mainly just like 2D images of the characters kind of layered onto real life shots and videos of urban landscape, and they're kind of just like walking through those real life shots. Again, not the most impressive thing, but it wasn't bad by any means. So that was the opening ending. Not the most impressive, but solid. So in terms of the actual episodes themselves, first off, the visuals. The visuals, I would say, are definitely much higher quality and cleaner than that of, say, Sarasame from X years ago. They definitely kept up the level of quality that they had with something like Undead Girl Murder Farce, but they utilized a definitely different style properly to fit the Shoushimin series instead of making character designs similar between the two sort of series. The character designs themselves do try to somewhat emulate the designs that Nishia Futoshi, who is a former Kyoani employee that unfortunately passed away in the arson incident, and he was the designer for the Hyoka series, for the Hyoka anime adaptation for Kyoani. But yeah, they tried to emulate that sort of design that Nishia did, and they come pretty close to it. The sort of the hair and the lighting and the color palettes and the paler color palettes and stuff like that are used for the skins are pretty reminiscent of those. The eyes and the lighting and stuff like that are also somewhat similar, but they're also kind of reminiscent. The way that the eyes are colored um uh are somewhat reminiscent of, I would say, Bang Dream character designs in a way, and it doesn't jar me, but it's like, oh, these eyes are somewhat different from what, say, Kyoani did. Uh, in terms of the animations themselves, the animations are definitely a little bit more slowed down, and there's not as many in between frames for both in like the regular kind of setup scenes and like discussions and when they're like walking around in the episode. For both, it kind of creates a slower pacing and slower kind of vibe. Um, Obviously, there are budgetary reasons as well. Um, but it does kind of work in this sort of genre where there's a lot of just walking around, slice of life mystery, and they're just kind of talking. And it's not them flying around and battling with swords or anything like that. Because so since they're just kind of talking a lot and just looking at items and thinking and doing internal monologues, that sort of slower pacing, that sort of not having as many in between frames unless it's for specific like visual scenes that we need. It kind of does work out in this series. They do save most of these sorts of like frames when the budget kind of needs to go ham on for specific scenes near the ends of episodes or specific scenes where the girl is, say, like flying around or whatever, or just like running around or whatever. But the general quality of the static frames and the character designs and the models stay pretty consistent and pretty high throughout the episodes, which is good. as well as the models for other stuff like food or whatnot. So I would definitely give that a thumbs up. What I would also point out is they have a pretty good, generally pretty great usage of 3D and blending where it needs to be. So a lot what'll happen is for a lot of swift and straightforward motions for human animations, like if they're pointing a finger or if they're like circling a finger around the mug or just kind of like scooping with their arms or something like that, like not something that's super complicated but just like very straightforward, they'll use these 3D models in these moments, and they won't like they'll try to use them in scenes where they're just kind of animating just part of the hand and they're not trying to animate the entire human body or anything like that. So it kind of works out pretty well. And otherwise, they'll use it for stuff like standard sets of fluids and objects, and they'll kind of combine it again with these like 2D frames of drawings. Like, so you'll have, if you have something like uh, they're pouring a liquid into a mug, right? The mug itself, the surface of the mug, and it's like bubbling and like the liquid and everything, that'll be 2D. But the cup that's pouring into the other mug, as well as the falling liquid, will be in 3D. So they did a lot of these like good like visual tricks that are very well blended together and well kind of combined. So that's definitely really good. Um, there are a few points in across some episodes where they use 3D for some mouth movements and some other like kind of smear effects and stuff like that, where it looks a little bit sketch, but generally it's quite well used and quite well combined together. So definitely props for that. In terms of the audio, I would say it's quite interesting because it's mostly silence. So it's pretty much minimal or no BGM. The BGMs tend to be kind of mainly just a few instruments or sections faintly in the background, unless it's like a super, super, super intense moment where they're just trying to be like, oh, this is intense, this is dramatic. And then they'll kind of blare the BGM a little bit. But for 80, 90% of the series, it's just silence. Even when they're like staying silent and staring at each other, or they're just kind of like, what's going on? The entire just it'll just be radio silence. There will be no BGM. It'll just almost it almost gives a live action drama kind of vibe because of the minimal amount of BGM that's used when they're just like, oh, they're trying to emulate real life sounds, so they're not using any BGM. So it's interesting. It's definitely a direct contrast to something like a Hyoko or some of the other Kyoani stuff, for instance, that's been done, where they try to at least add soft BGM here and there where they can. This is like mostly silent. And it's very interesting. And again, it makes it seem a little bit more like a live action drama. And when the serious stuff happens, it gives it a little bit more weight. Um, because the kind of silence kind of sets in on the audience, and it's not just like dun 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 dun, like there's not just like some like random intense BGM going on in the background. So I think that's a pretty good touch, especially again in a quieter, much more quiet series like this, like Shoshman. So that's pretty much it for the audio visuals. As for the story, the TLDR is you have these two characters, right? You have Jogoro, excuse me. You have Jogoro, the male main character, as well as the uh, female character, Osana Yuki, and they promised each other that they would just pretend to be ordinary people when they're getting into, I believe, high school now. Yeah, they entered high school and they promised to be ordinary people. And what this actually means is that before entering high school, they because they have all these like very smart instincts and they're very good. They have very high alert alertness and observational skills. They're essentially
Is this a Hachiman situation where like, oh, I'm smarter than everyone else?
yeah, it's similar to that, but it's like they're not constantly just spouting edgy shit, um, unlike Hachiman. But they because they have such great observational skills and they're like Sherlock Holmes essentially. They're both very smart and like Sherlock Holmes. They it's implied that before they ran into these situations where when they blurted out the answers to these like mysteries or whatever solutions because they knew they predicted what was going on, or they deduced what was going on, they got hit with some negative reactions, right? Some people didn't want to hear that sort of answer ahead of time, or they didn't think it was the answer, or blah blah. So because they got all these negative reactions, both Osanayuki as well as Jogoro both decided to kind of um, pretend to be ordinary people to kind of, I guess, quote unquote, seal in their powers and not try to be a smart alike and try to help try to solve mysteries all the time. And this is kind of a similar premise in a sense um, to Hyoka, right? Because the main character Hotaro, right, doesn't really like to go out there and want and like solve mysteries for everybody. But he kind of gets into these situations as he meets up with people as he spends his life in high school, right, in his high school years. So Shoshimin is pretty similar, where the two characters don't really quote unquote want to get involved, but every day when while they're living in high school, while they're as they're interacting with each other and with their sidekick, uh, Kengo and stuff like that, they come across mysteries where they're inevitably called upon to solve the mystery and kind of help out. Um, so that's sort of the general gist of it, and a lot of the mystery ends up being, and a lot of pretty much all of the episodes have ended up being individual mystery episodes. Um, yeah, pretty much all of them have been individual mystery episodes of varying sizes and colors. So again, this is, I would say, on from the outside, it kind of seems like, oh, it's just another Hyoka. It just seems very it's just more mystery. It's the same stuff. And in terms of the general structure, you would be right. But I would say in terms of details, Shoshimin is definitely a much more quiet and much more pure distilled mystery than Hyoga is. So what I mean by that is Hyoga is a lot more, it has a lot more scenes and a lot more screen time where Hotaro and his friends all kind of do these interactions with each other, right? Chitanda is interested in Hotaro. Mayaka and was Hotaro's sidekick, right? The other dude, uh,
Yeah.
are trying to, yeah, are trying to kind of resolve their relationships, right? And they have all these like character developments that get screen time and get proper resolution within Hyoka. Um, Shoshimin is not like that. So there's much less of that sort of interpersonal character developments and drama. Uh, and the mystery episodes, the deductions, and the discussions take up way more of the episode. They can even take up the whole episode. So you'll literally, so in Hyoka, for instance, right, you'll have this thing where you have a little bit of the character development, maybe you'll have Chitanda running around, and then you'll have the introduction of the mystery, right? The setup of how Hotaro even um, gets to meet this mystery, right? Who somebody comes up to him from the student council or whatever, and they're like, what's going on here? Can you help us with this? Blah blah. Or like Chitanda turns to Hotaru, it's like, please help me with this. Blah blah. Right? That happens. X number of minutes where they kind of run around and look at various items and they Sherlock Holmes the entire thing. And then a couple of minutes where at the end where Chitanda's like, oh Hotaru, you did well. Blah blah. And then resolution helps out. This is like if you have 18 minutes of an anime episode, literally like 17 minutes of it will just be Jogoro doing deductions. Like just talking about like how this could be. Like, oh, you had this item, but then he was this part in the city when blah 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 happened. But then there's like a this much percent probability that that he was doing it for that reason, and why couldn't he have been doing it for the other reason? Blah blah, and that'll literally go for all for 17 minutes, and then like he'll solve it, obviously, right? And then the 1 minute left is just like, oh yeah, that happened. That was pretty cool. And then like Jogoro just like, meets up with uh Osanai, the girl, and then they're like, oh, we'll just have some tea. And then it ends. Like even the resolution just gets like the cathartic resolution just gets punted off to the side and just almost all of it is just about the mystery. So it's very interesting. It's almost like a thought experiment the way that these episodes are panned out, and um, some of the foreshadowing and like hints for the audience and for the mystery series and stuff like that for the mystery at hand is a little bit on the nose at times, and it's like, yeah, sure, but I mean that's not like a terrible thing necessarily, right? Obviously, this was be eh, for like an anime, for like manga, because it's more short form and not manga, but for an anime, because it's more short form and this was clearly made for a more casual audience, right? It's obvious that some of it will be some of the foreshadowing and for some of the hints for the audience will be a little bit more on the nose. But other than that, it's like just chock full of mystery. It's all discussion, all deduction, all hints for the audience. Like this is what's going on. These are like the deductions that Jogoro is going through. That takes up a super majority of the episode, and that's almost pretty much like almost every episode. Um, Plus or minus, like there are small bits and parts where they're like, oh, this character gets in trouble, or like this character does a little bit of hint about their background, stuff like that. But then it gets right back into the mystery discussions essentially. So Shoshimin, so I think Yonezawa said in an interview that Shoshimin's later volumes especially was supposed to be a little bit more based towards a wider, more casual audience. But Yonezawa, I think he didn't say this in any of his interviews, but he takes a similar turn that someone like Agatha Christie or Arthur Conan Doyle did towards their approaches to writing mysteries. So what happened was like both of them kind of got tired of writing for their main characters, right? For their kind of cash cows. So for Sir um, Arthur Conan Doyle, it would be uh, what was it? It would be Holmes, right? Why the fuck did I why why the fuck did I get what yeah, yeah. So it would be for Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, it'll be Holmes. He got a little bit tired of writing about Holmes all the time. And Agatha Christie became tired of writing about, Hercule Poirot, right? And I think Yonezawa also kind of took a similar thing where he took the focus a little bit away from the characters and he just started writing mystery stuff, like individual mystery stories. He didn't really Shoshimin is a lot more just about the mystery stories individually than they are about the characters. About Jogoro or about Osanai. Like obviously they have this looming background where they're like, oh, we're supposed to you know hide our awesome deduction skill, blah 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 blah. Like they have that looming in the background, but for the most part, the hyper focus is on the individual mysteries themselves, even more so than Hyoga, even more so than any story within the Clotembo series. So that's very interesting, I think, in that sense, where it's just like Yonezawa is just like, yeah, just eat it, just eat these mysteries, like that's what you want, right? Just mysteries. So, um, I think that's a very interesting contrast, and for better or for worse, Shoshimin tries to minimize, or it doesn't seem it tries to minimize a lot of these like character background developments, or even doesn't seem very interested in properly developing it past slow spurts of like background exposition. So other than just vaguely mentioning how Osanai is, what Osanai is like, vaguely mentioning what the the pains that Jogoro went through before that made him become a little bit more recluse and reluctant to do his deduction stuff. Other than these sorts of like very brief foreshadowing, implication, vague, fuzzy kind of expositions, there's really nothing about the characters that really advance the development. It's pretty much just the mysteries, mystery all the time, mystery here, mystery there, mystery everywhere. So uh, I think if you are in it for the mystery stuff solely, and you were a little bit disappointed by, say, Hyoka kind of doing the will they, won't they with Chitanda and Hotaro all the time, I think you'll like Shoshimin a lot more because it just, boom, it just throws the mystery stuff at you and it doesn't really focus on anything else that much. The mysteries themselves do go back and forth between kind of smaller mundane stuff, right? Like who stole the cupcake or who ate the cake or stuff like that versus more larger, more serious stories that involve actual crimes and so on. So, that's standard for most mystery writers, right? Sometimes they'll just have small stuff. Sometimes they'll be this huge, grandiose setup. Um, and some of these larger series stories do affect the overall series character expositions and the like, and kind of advance that sort of development a little bit. But I would say again, Shoshimin doesn't really focus on that as much. Overall, in terms of the anime adaptation itself, I think the storyboard pacing can be a little bit plodding at times. So there's a lot of kind of people sitting down. They're kind of opening their burgers, just eating the cupcake, and then kind of talking a little bit, and then kind of leading up into ramping up into the uh, mystery kind of deduction deduction and kind of solving the case. And the slowness of the pacing kind of tends to mute or dull the level of intensity or seriousness when actual dramatic scenes come into play because it's so slow that when finally the news hits and they're like they kidnapped XYZ, then you're just like, okay, well, these characters have been sipping tea for the past 30 minutes, and now you're suddenly just like, yeah, they kidnapped the girl. It's like, okay. So I think the pacing kind of detracts from the seriousness a little bit. And I think it also kind of sometimes makes the BGM, the intense BGM that suddenly blares through when the serious things happens, it makes that a little bit cheesy as well, just because of the too harsh of a contrast. But I will say that the slower pace is at least justified by the nature of the series because it's a very slow slice of life, not slice of life, but like school life plus mystery kind of series, right? So you're not expecting a super high pace action kind of cyberpunk kind of series, right? That's not what you're here for. So the slower pace is justified, but I do think that this sort of pacing, the slower pacing that sometimes detracts from the overall atmosphere and vibe of the story has been, in my opinion, a slight running theme with Onotosha related works. So I don't know. I think it fits this series, but I do think that there are some points where that sort of slow pace does detract from the overall vibe of the anime. Um, as I might have implied before, the interpersonal character developments as well as the character background expositions in Shoshimin are a little bit spotty. They're not resolved as much, they're not pushed forward as much. They're often thrown kind of to the wayside as opposed to what happens in Hyoka, where that gets more coherently resolved a little bit more in Hyoka. In Shoushimin, it's a lot of more hand waving and kind of, all right, yeah, that's cool. Like the girl is next to the guy, but like let's kind of move on to the next mystery kind of business. Um, and so that's a little bit spotty at times, but in terms of an almost, as I mentioned, almost thought experiment like a very pure mystery focused series, not a detective series, not a series where the main character comes in and just magically solves everything, although the audience didn't see any of it. The audience sees a lot of these things. And Shoshimin has this thing where during the mystery discussions, Jogoro kind of goes through and interrogates various people, and they answer, you know, with what they have in hand. And so the audience can see the information building up and can help solve the case by themselves. So again, very nice mystery series. And in that sort of box, in terms of like just being a fun mystery series where the audience gets to try to solve the case, I would say Shoshima is probably at or near the top within like all of the anime that I've seen and all sort of mystery related anime that I know within the industry. So I would say very, 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 very like distilled, high quality mystery writing work done by Yonezawa, and I think if you like that sort of stuff, you should watch it. Like there is no reason for you to not watch or read Shoshimin if you like mystery writing and if you watch anime. Like you should just watch it. So I would definitely recommend for that. And but I would warn people that again, the pushing forward and the resolution of the character developments and the interpersonal relations and why is Jogoro this way? Why is that little girl this way? But that there's not as much resolution in that, but Shoshimin makes it very clear that the writing doesn't focus on that sort of resolution. It focuses on the journey, the mystery solving, the case that's played out, the giving hints to the audience, letting the audience solve all the mysteries. So because the focus is so much on that, and you know from the onset that the focus is so much on that, I don't think having a coherent resolution of the different characters matters as much. It's the same sort of tack that I took on for, say, Oshinoko, at least on the at least on the onset of that series, right? Because people were like, "What? The little kids did the reincarnation, and then they have to solve the mystery, blah blah blah." But the initial starting themes of Oshinoko weren't really focus on the mystery or on the murder mystery, right? It was focused on what it was like to be an idol, dealing with social media, stuff like that, right? So because of that was obvious that that was what uh, Akasaka Aka was aiming for with Oshinoko. I gave it a higher score, despite the whole other reincarnation murder mystery shenanigans being flat or not or whatever, right? Because that was not really the point of that series up until that point. So, in that same sense, Shoshimin is not really about the characters finding out more about themselves or whatever. It's just pure mystery goodness. It's just mystery discussions, solving mystery, letting the audience solve the mystery. It's just that all the fucking time. It's just those stories back to back to back to back to back. So, in that sense, I think it does it very, very well. I don't really have too much to complain about the audio visuals. I think they're done very well. Uh, so overall, I will probably give this an 8.8, maybe an 8.9. I think, as I mentioned in a YouTube comment a while back, 9 and above is really for me to start seriously considering the series like an anime of the year contender, right? So I think it's close to being an anime of the year contender potentially, but I think it's missing a little bit something. That little bit something is probably again some more like coherent character kind of pushing forward. Maybe like the characters maybe shouldn't have had that premise in the first place. Um, but I think if it had that little bit of push on that aspect, it would definitely have become an anime of the year contender for me. I think just pushing it with the mystery itself is very, very good, but I don't think that it makes it necessarily an anime of the year candidate. I could probably change my opinions later on. I do think this is a very, very, very solid, very good series. Um, do I think that it has again that spark to become anime of the year? Maybe not, probably not, but we'll see. But it is a very, very good series. Again, if you like mystery writing, if you like stuff like Sherlock Holmes or Agatha Christie, if you like Kyoka, the mysteries in Kyoka and how it was presented, and you're an anime watcher, you have no reason to not watch this. So, for mystery fans out there, check this one out.